sculpture class. Yeah, had this opportunity.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining this community meeting for the town of Scottsville here at Victory Hall Theater. My name is Matt Lawless. I serve as the Scottsville Town Administrator. We have a nice group here in the theater, and I appreciate you joining us online as well on our Zoom or in the future on the town's YouTube. Thank you very much. We'll start our event here shortly, and you'll be able to watch both in the room and see the presentation from our guests here today. I don't have a good AV setup in this room for hybrid meeting conversation. You'll be in viewer only mode online, but you can see the community meeting underway and follow up with any questions and comments. Thank you so much. Take it away, sir. Thank you.
Set up on presentation. Hi, I'm Jeff Savin. I'm with Complete Community Economies. That's my own company, and again, I use the term company kind of loosely because I'm me, and then whoever I like to bring in to help out. I was asked to facilitate some discussion and get some input, as well as provide some information about a couple of proposed housing projects here in Scottsville. To have good discussion and move forward with that. I'll talk more about what we're going to do today. I also want to introduce Ann Darby with Summit, and I forget the rest of what Summit's name is.
Design and Engineering. Hi, I'm Ann Darby. I'm the Planning Department Manager for Summit Design and Engineering. Here to partner with Jeff just to facilitate and to give an objective planner's opinion of the project.
So what we're going to do today is first, Ann and I are going to go through a presentation that's going to sort of just set the table a little bit. It's going to talk about where Scottsville is, where the current housing market is, and then talk a little bit about traffic. We are going to go over the layouts. We do have some renderings that we'll show, but those renderings are not from the developer. Those are just things that sort of think for everybody's idea of what could occur on these spaces. I do not represent the developer, nor does Ann. I've not spoken to the developer, nor has Ann. Our goal here is to leave the meeting with you all feeling a little more informed, but also capturing your input, hopefully answering some questions. And this is going before City Council on Tuesday. Is that the right day?
Weather permitting.
Yeah, weather permitting on Tuesday. And so the question is not just simply a yes or no question. That's really what we want to get at here. So we'll talk more about that, but there is the opportunity with the special use permit to put conditions on the proposal. What we're going to start off talking about is what is the proposal. And then we can talk about what people like about it, don't like about it, ways that they could improve it. Or if, you know, it is, if you just say, I hate every part of it, I don't want any part of it, we will capture that information. Okay. Or if you say, I love every part of it, and I like it just the way it is, we will capture that. So that's just sort of setting up where we're going. And
you want to do it, you can't. Either way. All right. I'll see how I do.
All right. First off, just talking about the population. In the last 10 years, based on the census, Scottsville has lost 7.4% of its population. Roughly, it looks like 42 people, according to the census. This does not necessarily show a long-term trend. It could just be a one-year blip. There's lots of reasons that could go to this. It could just be that a whole bunch of high school seniors left. I doubt that's the case, but it could be. It could be that you have an increasing age of your population, in which case you need a little more effort to replenish the population. Could just be that house family sizes are small, and that all gets captured here. But we're, again, this is just what the census shows. As far as housing units, there are 301 housing units on paper in the town, of which 43 are vacant, so that's 14%. That's not necessarily a super high percentage of vacancy or super low. It's just what it is. And what are the reasons behind that? We don't necessarily know every one of them. What I've heard is that some of those are Airbnb type houses. Some of them are unfit houses that may be blighted or deteriorated to the point where they're uninhabitable. And then there's probably a range in between that of maybe houses that people have inherited and just nobody has moved back here, but they don't know what they're going to do, and it might be for sale next week. Right? But that does show that there is that 14% vacancy. If you do a Zillow search, there's one house on Zillow for sale in Scottsville right now. I think there are probably a couple more houses for sale in Scottsville, but that's the only one that shows up on Zillow. This is, for me, the most interesting so far slide, and it just shows the age of the house. So 40% of the housing is built before 1939. So that's probably not super surprising. That's a really high percentage of housing. And then 44% is built between 1940 and 1980. So that means combined, 84% of your housing is at least 40 years old. What's also super interesting is that 0%, again, I don't think it's zero houses, but statistically 0% was built in the last 10, 11 years. That does show that Scottsville's housing stock is much older than most communities. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad. It just means that it is older. Housing replenishment is important for a few reasons. And again, I'm not advocating for either of these projects. I'm just saying that replenishing housing stock is important for a couple of reasons. One is just that not all houses are built equally, and some of it ages more poorly than others, especially houses that may have been built in 1970s or during the World War II era. Those are particularly bad housing construction times, I guess I would say. 1970s building requirements, building codes weren't necessarily great, and cheaper materials. And World War II, it's just we need some houses, so let's build them. Anyways, the other reason is that for accessibility. Older housing is less accessible to people who have mobility issues, whether due age or other reasons. All right, so I think I get to turn it over to Anne at this point.
Okay, we just want to lay a little bit of groundwork in terms of the planning that's already been done in the community and the public input that's already been done as part of those plans in the community. There was a mixed use, mixed income study done 3 years ago. As part of that, there was a survey. It asked about housing types or need for housing types in, I'm sorry, that I'm in Rial's way, need for housing, certain housing types in the town. So 24% of survey respondents said that small, affordable, single family homes, 2 to 3 bedrooms were the most desirable. 19% answered mid-sized homes, about three bedrooms were the most desirable. And then 14% said that senior living was an extremely desirable housing type in the town. And I think that's important to think about when we think about an aging population, the population shift, and whether or not people have the capacity, the ability, or the option to age in place as part of their community as people get older, maybe want to retire, but don't necessarily want to move somewhere where they're not part of the community yet. Again, all of that, we just point that out to say that the proposal is generally consistent with that feedback. So if you go to the next one. So there's a comprehensive plan, and this is consistent with the comprehensive plan. There was also more recently done a small area plan for the western part of town, of which this is a part. That was largely focused on the tire factory site, but this is the generally same part of that area. And basically just the circle is promote and support private sector construction of homes on the factory hillside. So just in general, this is consistent with public feedback and planning efforts, and just objectively it fits.
So just, I think a lot of people are often surprised at just how expensive new construction housing is. So what I wanted to do is talk a little bit about what we mean when we say affordable housing in this particular context. What we mean is housing that is affordable for the median household in the area. That roughly is gauged by taking 1/3 of your gross household income. That is to cover, in the case of home ownership, the principal, the interest, the taxes, the insurance, and the utilities. In the case of rental, it would be on a monthly basis, and it would be the rent and utilities. So what that correlates in this area is roughly $250,000 to $300,000 would be considered an affordable purchase price for this area. So when you go to build a house, it costs roughly $160 to $200 per square foot. Lots of things go into it. That's the actual purchase price. So is the land more or less valuable? That goes into the square footage price as well. The target pricing, like I said, we're working on here is $250,000 to $300,000, and generally what you can get is about a 1,200 to 2,200 square foot home, depending on the trend level and the amenities. And I just put this out there. Garages cost roughly $30,000 to $50,000, $30,000 to $45,000. Adds to the price of the house, something like that. When I was on the Richmond City Planning Commission, I was constantly amazed that I felt like we spent 90% of our time talking about where people are going to put their cars when they're not actually driving. But you know, that's not what we're talking about. That's what I think of when I think of garages. It's where are we going to put the car when we're not driving? Can you go back?
Yeah.
So the levels of amenities also is like what are the countertops like? What are the bath fixtures? All of those types of things go into it. But you can get a 2 to 3 bedroom home with 1.5 to 2 bathrooms pretty comfortably in that price range. Probably not going to have like a huge master suite. Probably not going to have any of these big great rooms, you know. But a solid house, well-built house, safe house, accessible house if that's what you want. It's somewhere in this range. I will also point out it's semi-detached, so like a duplex or a triplex with shared walls, or maybe it's one on top of the other, can be slightly less expensive, partly because we use less land, partly because we're sharing materials, and then long term you also have some energy savings because you know on a side by side you're only heating 3 walls instead of 4. Thank you. That's just kind of the lay of the land and what you get at this point, setting the expectation appropriate. So this is the proposed layout: 48 lots on Bird Street. The one entrance. This does not show the alley that runs. Is it 10 houses down there? Those houses there, there's an alley. So that would be rear automobile access to those houses. And the lots are 40 feet wide, 100 feet. There may be some slight variation from lot to lot, but that's the basic. Now, what we're showing here is our artist rendering. This is not from the developer. This is just to give you an idea of what houses in that price range could look like from the streetscape. This is not saying, this is not part of the proposal. It's just trying to center what it could look like. But the sidewalks and the trees, those are part of all right, so then again, this is just a little more detail on houses that roughly would fit those lots. I don't work for Nationwide. It's just I use their images, so I want to give them credit, you know, for their images. These are actually modular houses. can't really tell like look at it. If this would come on 4 tractor trailers, they set it down, and then a month later they have it all put together. But nonetheless, this house is, it looks like it's showing 1,663 square feet. So this is probably roughly in that $300,000 range, depending on what the land costs itself. It's 3 bedrooms with 2.5 beds. That's probably top of the line in that little range. The layouts, I know you can't really see it, but it's showing the 2.5 baths in the bedrooms there. This is a much smaller one, or kind of a mid-part size one. I think this one's like 1.5 stories. I think it does have some space upstairs, but it's roughly 1,300 square feet, and it's 3 bedrooms with 2 baths, cottage style. I guess it is all on 1 floor. And then this is a duplex, same basic style with the porch, but it's got 2 side-by-sides. Each one's roughly just under 1,000 square feet. So, you know, if you had this straddling 2 lots, just as an example, this would probably come in closer to like the 225 for each of those 2. And this is the Glen Heights. This is showing the layout. And then just for, again, I don't know how much value this has, but just to sort of visualize, this is a different area. We tried to think of what houses would match up with that area a little differently. Most of the existing houses either have accessory units, a garage, a separate garage, or they have a garage on the side. So we thought about some of that. The lots are a little bigger, so the houses can be a little wider. They don't have to be as deep and narrow. Garages seem to be popular in that neighborhood, so that one has a garage. Go ahead. And then this one, just as I talked about mobility and accessibility, that side part of this house is actually set up to be a suite, like a living suite. So you could have your mother or your father or your child who's coming from college, who doesn't have a job or whatever it may be, could live and have kind of a separate area, but it's still part of your household. And again, these are all just conceptual to think about what new housing could offer in these areas. And then I always turn over the hardest parts to hand. So the person is going to talk about that. And then we'll come back around for comments and questions.
Thanks. Okay, so a lot of questions and concerns have been about traffic. It may be that there needs to be an officially engineered, very math-oriented traffic impact analysis. Again, I'm not an engineer, I'm a planner. So what I generally do is find a rule of thumb and do sort of a scratch back of the envelope estimate to understand sort of what we're talking about. So, so that we can at least have a baseline for discussion about traffic. So VDOT analyzes average annual daily traffic. You've probably a million times, maybe you've noticed or you haven't, you've driven across and there's been what looks like a hose across the road. That's they're counting traffic. It's very accurate. And so they publish these, and then the Institute for Transportation Engineers, it's a national organization, they estimate they have very complicated methodology, but at the same time, just a general rule of thumb is 10 trips per household per day, which means estimate that American households have an average of 1.9 cars per household. Let's round it to 2. So that's every household is having, every new unit is having 5 trips per car per day, right? So I'm going to walk you through the math. I can see your eyes going, I'm not going to remember. But it is, it's really basic math, and it doesn't incorporate a lot of other things, school buses, et cetera. That's what a detailed traffic impact analysis would entail. But so, for example, for this area of Valley Street, there's currently 6,200 cars per day. So obviously there's a lot of traffic that's going through Scottsville from the counties around and we just talked in the last session about tourist destinations and that impact, et cetera. And so if you imagine all 48 units on Bird Street, so that's 48 units, 10 trips per day, 480. 480 is, and again, I've pointed out every time, this is my typo, the math works. It's supposed to say instead of 1,500, 6,200. So 480 is 7.7% of 6,200. So we're looking at a moderate increase in traffic for a route that already has a lot of traffic going through the town from other localities. The highest impact for the Bird Street development would be on Bird Street itself between Page and Valley. And that's already 1,000 cars per day. Our same math, if you use 48 times 10, 480 is 48% of 1,000. So I don't think there's any way of getting around that there will be a significant traffic impact, even just with this back of the envelope study. That is, I'm just objectively, there's going to be an impact there. So 48% rough estimate. This Valley Street south of Main Street to the middle of the bridge is 4,900 cars a day. That's again 9.7% increase just in general. And then for Blenheim, it's currently 1,500 cars per day in that section of Blenheim. That, if we're looking at 25 units times 10, 250, 16, that's a 16% maximum increase in traffic. So I think that helps it put a little bit of perspective, because it's going to be more cars per day, but because Scottsville has so much regional traffic going through these main arteries, it isn't as much of a significant impact to traffic as you would think. I'm not trying to diminish the impacts that it will have on Bird Street, but it gives us a baseline for conversation.
And just for reference, roughly 1,000 cars today translates to approximately a car every minute to two. So if you have half of that, it would be a car on average, every 2 to 3 minutes is what Bird Street, the additional traffic. Now we know that most of those trips, or at least half of those trips, are probably going to be at the same time everybody else is on the road, right? So it's not evenly distributed over the day. All right, so that hopefully just sort of like we're all talking about the same thing now. That's really all I was trying to get across here. We didn't do introductions. We're not going to do introductions, but what I would like you to do is, if you have a comment or a question, you could state your name at the beginning of that. So what I'd like to do, and again, is first off just answer questions, specific or general. More specific is usually helpful, but whatever questions you have, and then we'll work from that into, maybe some general concerns, and hopefully get some specific guidance that we can pass along to the council. Does that all sound fair to you guys? Who wants to start? Okay.
I'm Susan Cage. And I live 300 yards from the town limit. My question addresses traffic. Has anybody considered capacity? And where I'm coming from is that under the town ordinances, anything more than 50 dwelling units requires a second entrance, which we know is not possible. There is one entrance and exit from that factory site. And that's first. If we have 48 units as proposed under the SUP, that essentially uses up all of the street capacity, leaving nothing for the tire factory itself if it should ever come to pass or something would happen with that. So to me, this they would just the tire factory would just sit there until it decays away. So how would you address the capacity issue?
Well, okay, so first off, again, we are not representing the developers here. We're just trying to capture the questions. When I can answer a specific question, I will. I might defer this question to Matt because I'm unfamiliar with the 50. Is that a public safety that you have to have 2 ways in and out, or is that traffic capacity?
Yeah, it lives in our site plan regulations and relates to emergency access. But once you get to a big enough site, you start to worry about maybe having 2 ways for a traffic truck to get in, or a fire truck to get in.
But would that be into and out of the Bird Street development?
into the project area.
Project
So
area.
for this one, you see it's only got the one street going in.
Right.
And it's of a size where that's okay. But the question points out, there's other areas around this that are gonna be constrained because there's only the one road in on Birch Street right now.
And so that's a good example, however, of what could be a potential condition is that they added another entrance to the development. So I don't think I have a definitive answer to you about what happens later. However, that is an example of what a condition could look like.
And that is in the Scottsville zoning ordinance.
The two entrances
Anything
over
over 50 units
It
requires
is-
a second entrance.
and it is possible
for
again.
fire safety.
I'm not trying to, you can't always determine motive, so I'm not trying to, but it would make sense that you might want to keep this under 50 if 50 triggers that. So, but I'm just saying that's very valuable. It's something we haven't heard earlier. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am. Okay.
We live a couple miles up on Highway 20. My son owns properties within Scottsville. I have nothing against development. My problem is we need a comprehensive development plan for the entire parcel. Otherwise, it's kind of death by 1,000 cuts. So it's like, oh, we 48 here, so we don't need any access. Oh, that's all filled out. Well, then we need this. And then pretty soon, oh my gosh, we've overextended the septic capability. Now what are we going to do? If we have a comprehensive plan, then we can figure out what's the traffic really going to be with the entire project. What's the septic and water need for the entire project? What are the road access needs going to be? But doing it piecemeal, it's kind of like, well, I'm going to build a house, but not have a plan. I'm going to build a bathroom and this. You need a comprehensive plan for the entire parcel, and then hold the developer to that plan, because they're going to come back shortly. They'll say this 48. Oh, we want to develop this 10 acres. We want a little bit more here, and pretty soon it's death by 1,000 cuts. So if you have a total plan, here's what you can develop, and the town holds them to it, then these problems can be addressed equitably, fairly, and you end up with a nice town.
Well, thank you. And so I do have similar portions of that have come up earlier. So I do have a couple responses to that, but we will also document if we would request a larger plan for the whole area. First off, this SUP, special use permit, is for this particular development only. So to come back later, you would have to present another special use permit. Again, I'm not saying that's not going to happen, that it's good or it's bad. I'm just saying this is the way it is. Legally, approving this special use permit does not set legal precedent for a future. And it could be, and I'm just, again, explaining that if another one came in later for another 40, at that point, it's not 2 under 50, but you would require a second entrance if you didn't already do it. So I'm not trying to diminish that concern. I'm just trying to explain the process behind it. And
It's going to be easier to lay this out now as compared to, is the town council going to have the backbone to stand up to them when they come back to the next 40 unit project they will do.
And that you're not the first person to that concern. So, but I appreciate it. The other thing I just want to tell you is that my understanding is that the water and sewer for this area is operating at approximately 1/3 of the maximum capacity. So adding these households certainly doesn't lower the demand on that, but it doesn't get even close to the maximum capacity. current. You know, that's all I can say about it. Is that, yeah, that's another thing that's come up for question. The developer would be responsible for running from basically Bird Street up into the development and to each house individually as part of their cost of development. Which brings up one other real quick thing. The proposal is for the lots and does not talk about the developer here is not a home builder. And so we don't, that's why we came up with what could be in those homes, but the lots would be sold to individual buyers, or it is possible that another developer buys the entire lot and then develops it. So specific houses are not part of it currently. However, conditions could be placed as to size and type, etc., of the houses. And real quick,
I guess I was going to wonder, in terms of responding to this concern, what sort of fiscal sense or it makes, or the potential for that to happen, to actually take the entire plot of land and then to make a whole plan for it, because it's an area one with lowering population. So how do you know fiscally you're even going to see a return on your investment? Someone needs to first make, you have to have money to make money. So they need to replenish this plan first before they would go into anything else anyway. So I don't know that if you're waiting for someone to come in with some grand master plan, fiscally, I don't know that it would make sense for anyone to do that in this area, because you don't know how much of a return you're going to get. I don't know that you'll ever see that plan come as cohesively as you guys have been asking for it, because things are made piecemeal all around. Any development you ever see made, it isn't just some huge sweeping piece. So I don't know, I guess we'll be waiting a long time unless this area becomes more in demand, which it isn't right now at this point. I don't think you'll see that kind of sweeping exchange. And if it is at that point, it's going to be way more units, again, to see a return on that investment. So you're looking at something much larger. I feel like you have more control with two separate special use permits than you would just one sweeping reform area. I just wanted to share my opinion on that.
Yeah, and I mean, there are, again, all of this is a balance. And while you may get some more security in one way of having this is what the plan is, we know what it is, we can build it out. The other side is, does it do any good if it only gets halfway done? And then what have you maybe lost because the demand wasn't there? So there are the pluses and minuses on both sides.
But you would just develop, you'd have the plan, you would develop this 48. When they fill out and make the money from that, then you can move to the next whatever. But moving through the plan, you know, you don't have to develop all acres or involve all of it at once. You do it as a piecemeal thing, but it'll be an integrated piecemeal when you're done.
Yeah. I think what we've got here is this is what the proposal is now, and the question is, if I'm just gonna, I do not represent the developer. I've not spoken to the developer. If I were a developer, my response to that is, well, I don't have any plans for doing the rest of it. Whether that was intrinsically true or not, that would be my response, I guess, is what I would say. So I'm just trying to put it out there. But I do want to say one more thing, and then I'll come back around, actually over here next. So this area, just talking about Bird Street right now, this area is by right available to develop up to 13 home sites on this land. So that is without any special conditions, without any review. This developer could come in and put 13 homes there. 13 homes is less than 48, definitely. But so, you know, maybe that's fine, I guess. And maybe that would never happen because there's not enough profit in 13 homes to make it worth that thing. All I'm saying is, if you put conditions that the developer does not feel are reasonable, they can just go and build what they want to 13. So it doesn't mean that they have to accept the conditions. They only have to accept the conditions if they want to move forward with this plan. Right. So I just wanted to clarify that. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Erin Root. I wanted to, as you were talking about the architectural design, I just wanted to speak to that and ask a couple questions. The first being, there's a lot of value within architectural value within this town, architectural history value. And so I think a lot of the concern is what is a potentially, you know, for lack of a better word, slap and tap development going to do to that value of the town. So I'm wondering if there is any way to put any kind of architectural design or landscape architectural design conditions on this.
Yeah.
There is. Okay. And what does that look like? Is that how vague or specific is that? And how does that happen?
So it can happen in whatever you, and I mean you in the big picture you want it to be. But again, remembering what is reasonable. So if you want to make sure that all the homes have a porch, you could just say that it has a porch. That means they can build a 2-foot deep porch that's just a porch for show, or you can require it to be at least 8 feet and a usable porch.
May I just say one thing? So the conditions will be restricted to the language that is in the special use permit ordinance, which is part of the zoning ordinance. So there's a section that says town council may put any restrictions or conditions that they want to within, and sorry, I haven't memorized it right now, but setbacks would be acceptable, height would be acceptable, landscaping would be acceptable, proven that it wouldn't have a negative impact on health, human safety would be an example. That said, there's only so far you can go. You can't say, well, he wants to use cedar shake, blah, 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 et cetera. But to some extent, yes. And I think that there is a lot of leeway that town council could use to put specifications in the SUP to make it something that would be very appropriate to blend with the existing fabric of that house.
I'll come back here for one more step. At the last session, there was a request to have it that no more than, what was it, 4 in a row houses could be the same?
Yeah.
Oh, no, two next to each other.
No, two. Yeah.
So
So like 4 architectural styles mixed in. I think that's what I think. Yeah.
So again, because these lots, that would really only be a concern, I think, as far as them being identical. If a single developer bought several and was putting it as currently planned, doesn't mean that's the way it would end up. You would buy a lot and say, this is the house I want, and it would need to meet whatever conditions were in the special use permit. So the special use permit goes with the property, not just the particular app. I'll be with you in a moment. We had a question over here.
Just a couple of questions, kind of going back to earlier in the presentation. How much was the population between
the census reported it as I wasn't 42 people, so it was 7.4%.
And how much was the traffic for Valley Street and Bird?
Just in 2020?
No, just on your study report. What was the percentage for that Valley Street?
Valley Street.
Can you go back?
6,200 for the part. I don't know the actual names, just the route number. So where Route 6 comes in from the east, north, it was 6,200, and south was 4,000.
7.7%. So just kind of semantics here. It's interesting that that decrease in population was noted as potential of concern, yet 7.7% is noted on this part is noted as negligent. So it's just a semantics aspect there. Looking at most of the areas, zip codes according to the American Community Survey for the Greater Scottsville area, there has been a fair amount of increase, except for a few areas. Buckingham, the percent is almost 0 and change. As a whole county, they only lost 322 people. That's pretty huge. Just barely even moving. And there has been a decrease
in Howardsville, but for the greater Scottsville area, it's been for the most part an increase. So just semantics wise, seeing some of these percentages talking about traffic versus the population changes.
I'm sorry,
it's interesting.
For the population, I thought I had said that this does not necessarily represent a trend.
Right, right, you did.
And but there are plenty of reasons for it.
It's also worth noting that it's only been the last 30 some odd years that Scottsville has been over 150 people. So, you know, like kind of you used on the traffic thing, it's negligible. It's not something to note as a huge trend like you've seen. So with that in mind, with the houses and things like that, listening into a lot of the community meetings so far, traffic has been a concern, and the amount of houses, and mostly knowing what the full plan is going to be has been one of the things that has been consistent. And on page 22 of the West Area Plan, there's a discussion for Scottsville, there's a discussion about the plan unit development, how it should be a priority to create a plan unit development ordinance. How would a plan unit ordinance development ordinance play into effect in order to create this overall plan? We all know that Virginia Land Company isn't hurting for money. It's the #1 land developer in Central Virginia. So having a full plan or concept for Bird Street and Blenheim would not really impact their overall returns if you think about the company's finances overall. So how would the Scottsville's own paperwork stating that this plan unit development should be a priority, which would kind of give us that, would that impact this request for more of a comprehensive look at the overall development plan for all the acres owned by Virginia Land Company in question, the 144 acres on Blenheim or thereabouts in the 60 here?
I'm sorry, I'm trying to figure out what the specific question is. So there currently is not.
How would a planned unit development ordinance created? It's in the Scottsville West Area Plan that should be a priority. Would that help in requesting that a full plan be developed and shown to the town? Or?
So if you had one, would that help? Is what you're asking. Okay. And I
actually was going to ask Matt if you'd give it some background. The PUD, so it was recommended that you create a PUD to then be provisionally applied as needed.
Just to update, the last time it was brought up for the Planning Commission to consider a PUD in September, the same day that these developments were proposed to the Planning Commission, and then it hasn't been brought up again. So I'm just interested on seeing how that would play out. So
you would have the date that the application is made, it basically freezes the laws. So it's kind of a moot point. We can speak about it theoretically. The PUD would have had to be created beforehand, and it depends on the details of it, but a PUD, I think, would give the development some structure that was thought of beforehand, so it's a little bit more clear than the special use permit. You may end up ending up at the same place because the PUD would be less of a political process, and you actually wouldn't be doing this right now. And so pros and cons. It's more clear. Am I interpreting that that's the way y'all would be using that? Okay, so the pro would be, it would be more clear from the beginning, and it would be an objective public process before you have a zoning ordinance amendment. And so that is positive because it's more proactive and less reactive, because then the town, does that make sense? So it's a moot point right now because those were the laws at the time of the application. The PUD wasn't created. And then there are pros and cons, but ultimately you'll probably end up in about the same place.
But would something like that also give more controls on what the builders then could build, like architecturally and things of that sort? Yeah,
you would do that. You at the time of creating the PUD, you would create the zoning district, create that, and then it would get applied as needed. So it's a provisional zoning district. You wouldn't zone a large area PUD. You would do a rezoning. Is that correct? To a PUD. And then that would say, in this development, we need streets to be a certain width, we need setbacks to be a certain, we need to have architectural variation, we need to have, and all of that would be determined in advance. And so Matt's not, so yeah. So I didn't know about that. I haven't been part of that process or know why the PUD wasn't, why it hasn't happened, but I don't necessarily think that if the PUD had been in place that, I mean, it would give a chance to have thought as a community what you want before you put it in place. So,
like you said, it would be proactive versus reactive.
Yeah, that's, yeah.
So
Oh,
so yeah.
We'll come back. All right. Ma'am, go ahead.
I wanted to ask about environmental conditions. As we all know, this was a tire factory for 60 years, long before there were a lot of environmental regulations. The reports that were done in 2019 by the consultants said that there was a lot of missing information and strongly recommended a phase 2 environmental site assessment. Question is, two questions. Can that be applied for the whole site with this particular SUP? And if not, why not?
So when you say whole site,
well, I'd like it to be for the full 63 acres, but obviously you got to look at the 20 acres. But you could at least do it for the 20 acres.
So
and it's been said that happens with the site plan review, but there's no guarantee that will be a full phase 2 EFA. So
I guess there's two parts. Is that, as far as I know, legally that could be a condition that you put on it. Banks will not finance projects without a phase 2 assessment, and then furthermore without abatement. So they will finance the abatement. The town could participate with the state Department of Environmental Quality to receive a grant for cleanup or for assessment if they wanted to assist with that. But yeah, as far as the phase 2 goes, it could be included as a condition. It's also one of those things that a bank is going to require before you finance the project.
I do realize the bank could specifically require that. So.
Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I just want to
and remember to shut my hands up.
Just to make a point, like what Aaron was asking about, you brought up in the last session. The way the zoning is and the way the rules are, and the way the lot sizes are, someone can move to single wide or double wide onto those properties, and that would be acceptable. I don't think that fits into your ideology of the architectural review board and the architectural part of it. So keep that in mind that yes, there is some controls, but the way everything is right now, we can put a double wide on there and that would be absolutely acceptable and legal.
If right. And if however, if one of the conditions was some type of art, if not an architectural review board, it would actually be a requirement that it must be a certain size, etc. That could be a condition that you place upon the special use permit.
And also what was brought up too is to have this high density, there has to be a homeowner association. The homeowner association would have its own review board. The municipality, our municipality, wouldn't be able to supersede their municipality.
All right. Real quick before I come back to you, did anybody else have a question that hasn't spoken?
Brian, just a couple questions. One, just to clarify that the Bird Street, is that within the confines of the tire factory?
So it is, as you're going to the tire factory, there's a house, and then there's kind of a roadish driveway that goes up to another little house, and it's the part up on the hill just past that.
Right. So it's up on the right.
Correct.
This is the tire factory.
Thank you. And I guess just for record, understanding the impact analysis of sewers, utilities, police, etc., would be valuable to see at some point. And again, I don't know if that's this forum or somewhere else. And then just one other question. You mentioned the population is decreasing, there are units available, and this may be a town council question, but why housing? So why put more units in a declining population?
Well, so I can tell you theoretically, I'll let Karen, it sounds like she has something to say here. So after talking, you start and I'll fill
No, I didn't mean to get that excited about it. But really, they're related. You will lose population if you don't have places for people to live, in a nutshell.
And appropriate places to live. And part of that is, again, accessibility and mobility issues. Also, while every house I've ever purchased, as if I've purchased a ton, purchased two, needed a whole lot of work, and that's the way I like to do it. I evidently am an outlier right, across the country. Most people want a house they can move into that's ready, that already has the appliances they want, and already has the layout they want. So it's tough for me to even think like that, because that's just not the way I am, but that is evidently the way the majority of Americans are. Yes.
Kim Highlands, that's maybe more of a question for that. There should be a housing needs assessment for Albemarle County. Is there one specific to Scottsville?
No, it's countywide, unfortunately, and our data gets a little bit mixed up because we're having to mix with parts of that model that are pretty different. The affordability number is tricky there, and I worry about it. So the average family in Albemarle County more money than I do, and so the affordable house in Crozet is not the same as the affordable house in Scottsville. So that makes it a little bit hard for us to use the affordability data, but it does also mean that like that $350,000 house is more than the average for Scottsville, but it's very helpful for Albemarle County as a whole. If I'm looking to move to Albemarle because I like the county schools and what I'm seeing in Crozet is way too expensive for me, then the $300,000 house in Scottsville looks like a pretty good deal.
And I'm just thinking too, that might help gear towards whether it's elderly, differences in the rural parts of the county.
Albemarle's housing assessment seeks to basically needing more of everything. That the population is growing for economic reasons. It's a good school system, it's good employers here. People are coming from all over the country to live in Albemarle County, and the prices are going up and up and up. And we need houses for retirees, houses for first-time home buyers, houses for wealthy tech employees. And so the housing assessment speaks to all of that. Scottsville doesn't have to provide it all, but it needs to happen somewhere that isn't Madison Heights.
We have one back in the back, and then we'll come back to you.
This is the follow-up to the so you had mentioned also that the SUP is not something that can set precedent. However, the engineer for the developer has stated multiple times during the planning commission meetings and things like that, that typically, since they do want to continue to develop in both locations, that these would likely be the blueprints for follow-up developments. So can the town then read into this that there is an intention to continue to phase out development and request as a condition the full blueprint plan according to the town ordinances? And kind of a caveat to that, what conditions are actually legally available to the town? Because certain conditions can be requested, but they're not legally available according to state law. So what conditions can the town actually request that are legally appropriate?
So there's several parts to that. First is you as reasonable people can reasonably assume based on the information that's put ahead of you that the developer does or does not have further plans. This special use permit only covers this area. I am not sure legally if you could require what the follow-up would be. First off, I'm not sure that you could require an entire site plan as part of one of the conditions. If you did, and I as a developer said, I have no other current plans, what recourse you would have later, I just don't know. You probably need to talk to the town attorney to figure that part out. However, Anne has more experience specifically with this than me, so she might have a better answer.
Yeah, what the town can make conditions on is explicitly written out in the special use permit ordinance in exactly the writing. So if the town oversteps that, it's possible. I've seen it many times that a developer just says, okay, I acknowledge that you're overstepping and we're going to give it to you anyway because we want this to go. I've also seen it go to court. So it needs to be read very carefully, the language, and I wish if I had known hindsight, I would have put it, in the PowerPoint so we could reference it. But the fact is that any conditions put, and absolutely legally, town council can put conditions, but it needs to be careful about not overstepping those bounds. And it will come down to a legal interpretation of the special use permit language in the adopted ordinance.
And then there's the other part of it, which is that even if they are legal, if the developer finds them to be overly burdensome, they do have the fallback position to do the by right development, which some people might find to be better, and some people might think is never going to happen, and some people might find to be a worse end use. So I'm just saying that that's kind of a fallback position for not coming to agreement with the developer on the special use permit. It doesn't mean that it's bad or worse or better. It just means that that is the other position. Go ahead.
I had a couple comments regarding like why build houses for a shrinking population. And I wanted to point out that 35% of the housing in Scottsville is rated at fair or poor, according to both the county and the town's architectural review board, meaning that those houses are going, and if at average $100 to $400 per square foot to rehab a house that's over 100 years old, that means that's, and many of those houses are in the the historical review overlay district. Thank you. So that means even more has to go into the rehabbing of those houses. There needs to be options outside of that 35%, or else you'll have this. You'll continue to decrease population. If the population continues to decrease, and this is sort of personal and professional, having worked in the southern feeder pattern of North County Public Schools, they will then start to funnel resources out of the southern feeder pattern because there won't be enough population to maintain those schools. And so in a community that's already lost one elementary school, you never want to see more schools and less money and the services or things going into your schools in your area, which is what they'll have to do just practically. So you need to attract people, if for no other reason, and this is personal, but Zach and I weren't at the 2 meetings this morning because we were volunteering our time with Stan, moving a sculpture from Kluge-Ruhe to the Scanland, and we were the only ones. So people need to be here in order for things to happen, in order to have volunteers and to have boards of things and to have things happen. And so we certainly don't want to cater to a losing population. We want to broaden to attract people to come here so that as people age out and as people move away, there continues to be a community. Because at the end of the day, that's what it's about, a community. It isn't about cars. It isn't about these, your septic, because they wouldn't be on septic anyway, but it's about building community. And if we don't have people here in order to foster that, it just won't be sustainable. So, that's my thought on that.
I want to give anybody that hasn't spoken yet, if you have any comments or questions before I go back. Yes.
Yeah, I was just wondering what's the market for these types of homes? Who are they looking to attract to build these out in Scottsville? This makes subdivision townhouses. What out in the country? What's the attractive? What's attractive about that?
Well, so the first part is that there would be new construction, and new construction homes is at its lowest point since I think the early 90s, and I think that's just because that's when they started tracking it. So new construction homes nationwide is at a very, very low in place. Meanwhile, now the last 2 years, the US population has not grown very much, but meanwhile, the population is heavy, so there is increased demand. So just whether they specifically wanted to move to Scottsville versus somewhere else, the fact that it's a new home and not in Crozet, you know, might be reason enough that it's nice. I did not dig into the very deeply, but there was a market study demand. Do you want to?
Yeah, I can speak a little bit to that stuff. We did this market study, which has kind of funny nicknames for the different demographic groups and like what they like to buy and spend their money on. But I kind of give the example of like my parents would be a good buyer for this. They're in a little duplex in Yorktown now, and they don't want to do as much yard work as they used to, and having something new that they don't fix up, like that appeals to them. And then being able to walk to the restaurant, that's fun. At the other end of the demographic, like my best friend from high school in Winchester, he lives in Charlottetown, and he's in one of the townhouses at Infinity. Because yeah, he grew up on some land that he doesn't enjoy mowing lawns in his free time. So the small lot and the commute to Charlottesville, that feels okay for him. And he doesn't have any kids now. So both like my parents and my best buddy from high school, they're in that kind of smaller family demographic where maybe it's more sense. Does that help to kind of put a face on the market data?
Yeah.
Okay. And remember, it's also not just about attracting people from outside the community. And again, I'm not trying to say you need all these houses or you need these houses you don't need. I'm just saying, market-wise, it's not just about attracting people from outside the community to buy and locate here in the community, although I think it is reasonable to assume that many of these houses would be. It's also about providing an option for people who currently live in the area who may be renting and to find a place that they can purchase and stay, or have a house that's just too much for them. Maybe they age to the point where they don't want to take care of the larger house and the larger yard, and this gives them another option. So it's really just about having the options is part of the it is attractive to people. Everybody is attracted to something different. So it's very easy for us to think, I like this, everybody else must like it. Personally, I would not buy one of these houses because it's not what I like, but that doesn't mean that they're. I've often found that I am in the minority as far as my preferences for virtually everything. So there's nothing more frustrating than finding a product that works perfectly and then taking off the market. So the gray areas.
Go ahead. Just one more clarifying question based on some of the conversation. So, no yard maintenance, etc. Just when I initially looked at this, it does say houses, it doesn't say units, right? So I assume 48 houses on 12 acres means quarter acre per lot. Was misunderstood.
So, well, because of the way, can you do the one that shows the 36, but I will make sure that it's clear.
Yes, I was waiting for that one to.
So, okay, this is showing 36. So if you take the cul-de-sac and you added the other 12 that they've taken off and a couple here, what you see is the general plan. So much of that area is retained as green space or blue space in the case of the so each of the lots is approximately 4,000 square feet, 45. Yes.
Can you clarify with regards to that how the special use permit requires open spaces? A certain percentage of the land needs to be open, and how at least with Bird Street, was there recently a land deal that kind of went into that open space area plan?
Well, so there is the easement for the power line that goes through there, so you just can't build underneath the power. So that is going to be green space because of that. For a special use permit, if this or the other version with the 48 houses is approved with that layout, they would have to stick to that layout. They can't say, oh, well, now that I'm approved for 48 houses, I'm going to put 3 back here at the corner, 2 over here, and this lot's bigger. They would have to stick to that plan. how they became this particular one. Now that pond is somewhat still existing, currently existing. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So the pond currently exists. So you're not going to get environmental permits to drain that pond. So you know that sort of. So that's kind of how it was formed. So again, maybe I misunderstood your question. It sounded like there were two parts. One was the future, where they have to stick to this, and one was, did they do this only because somebody was making them do it?
So I think the last question was about the lot size. The lot size is also informed by the council requirement to have a certain amount of the overall 12-acre lot undeveloped as a part of open and green space, right?
So there's a shared green space there with the trails and the pond and that sort of courtyard towards the back. That's required in the town's rules, that in exchange for the increase in density, they have to be clustered together and provide shared space. So that's a policy choice of the town, that it's better if there's common space that's shared, fewer trees cut down, and that the houses be on smaller lots.
So it's not really like all the houses on 12 acres, it's more like all the houses on 9 acres.
Yeah, the word for taking that land and putting more houses on it, but also having the lots all filled out is sprawl.
So with that in mind, then that granted, right there on Bird Street, for instance, or at this time, there's the Appalachian Power line, there's the pond, but on some of the other open space as it's currently developed, can it be developed in future phases?
Oh, no.
And that is,
It's all part of one special use permit or special law, it's not called it. And once it's done, it's done.
Right.
There's no, they could fill in the pond and build homes on that. Is that what you're asking?
Right, on that 12 acres. So that next trapezoid to the lower left here, that could be that could be another special use permit to develop that area.
Yeah.
and how would that next special use permit be impacted by the 18 acres of wetlands that's given to the town? Would they be also required to have the 30% open space, or would that wetlands play into that?
Sarah's talking about below the factory is a conserved wetland area. Maybe, but if we're not happy with how the open space is configured, that would be a good reason to reject an SCP. If we saw this meadow and said, yeah, I don't like that, I'd rather have a tennis court, like reject it and tell the applicant to come back with a tennis court if that's what you'd like to see. So they have the ability to rearrange that open space, but if we don't judge it sufficient, that's a really good reason to reject it.
Yes.
Is there a reason you don't have, I know this is the special use permit, but is there a reason you don't have a rendition up there for 13 by right?
Yes, because that wasn't proposed. And because it's by right, there are some restrictions.
It's one of the choices for people to check that, that they were interested in that as an option. I just wondered why you didn't have that. John.
The short answer is we had a finite amount of time to spend on rendering, so we chose to do a rendering of what was proposed. Theoretically, you could, theoretically you could keep going.
And I guess part of it is less house restriction based on lot size. So I don't want to go down the road and get past that. I'm just saying it is possible that if the property owner wanted to maximize that area, they could put much larger houses at a much higher price point. It's also possible that they don't do anything, or it's possible that they put 2 houses and each of them gets 9 acres. I mean, the point is that here there's a defined, the special use permit has a defined development plan for that parcel. the city, or the town council has an opportunity to further define that with conditions. With the by right, most of those definitions go away. There are still minimum lot sizes, is that correct, or right?
Yeah.
So there are still some definitions, but how those are configured is not up for review. So, okay, real quick, before we go to these next questions, I want to say that we are nearing our time. So with that in mind, I'd like you all to start thinking about, and you should have various opportunities of paper in front of you to think about specifically conditions or concerns that you have so that we can collect all of those.
Can I just clarify that a little bit?
Yeah.
So I'm Stuart Russell on town council, and on what we are going to be voting on is we really have a couple of options. We can either totally reject this and the Beaver Land Company can build by right with 12 houses. And we have very little control over what they put up there. They have proposed, they would like to build more houses than that, and then this is how they propose to do it. So we can either, as a town, we can either accept what they're giving us, or we can say, nope, we'll give you more, but here's our conditions for giving you more. Doesn't have to be this number, it could be something else. So we could say, all right, our vision for the land up there is, I'm just making this up, and an earthship village with eco houses that you can't see from the land, and we want them all built to these constructions. And you know, if you want to put one more house on there than you have the right to, you gotta follow these rules. So what we'd like to know from you all is, what would you like to see up there? If it's not the 12 houses that they can put up there by right, what else? And we're willing to accept a few more houses. What would you like to see up? So we'd like to hear from you is, what's your vision?
So to clear that up, so there is a choice anywhere between the 13 that he has by right. You could use a special use permit to do 2 more houses or 5 more houses. It doesn't have to be 36 or 48. It can be anywhere between.
Yeah, I mean, we could give him a special use permit for 25 houses with these conditions, and you take it or leave it. You either build what we want, or you go build with
and I'm not sure people understand that, because you know I've been involved in this thing for a while, and that doesn't seem to be out there. It's like, you know, you're locked into 48 or 36.
No, we can nope.
Right.
Well, we can do whatever we want.
Right.
Above the by right one.
Well, right. And I would just say though, that if the developer does not feel those are reasonable, they are not locked to it. They could just say, no, we're not gonna.
Then they go back to the fine by right.
Like if you approve a special use permit with what the developer feels are unreasonable conditions on it, they can go back to the by right. So they can do that. So you were next,
and I wanted to say that if one of the concerns that people have brought forth is affordability, this is what keeps the price point at $250,000 to $300,000 per house. And the fewer houses you have, the more expensive the houses become. Also, if they did do the by right, this is more in alignment with the population density in the rest of the town. 13-acre lots up there would be jarring and feel very suburban, quite frankly, versus what is in those neighborhoods, in the neighborhood directly connected to this Bird Street property. Same with the one up on Blenheim. So that the reason I support a higher density build is because there's higher density right next to it and right here in the town. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you.
But before I get to my question about that, just to answer about the density and the lot sizes, the Bird Street lot sizes only match one area in Scottsville, and that's the Harrison Street directly across from the Baptist Church. The lots directly next to Bird Street are between 2 and 4 acres, and down from that, they get into between about 1/4 of an acre to an acre. And that's for pretty much the remainder of town. The only area with really high density is right there, that just directly across on the hillside at Harrison Street. And Blenheim, but there isn't a lot of residential on Main Street. It's mostly businesses. So if you're taking into account Main Street, but actually
And
I can go through and tell you that every lot on Main Street is about 0.03, 0.28 versus the much smaller lot sizes that are going to be seen here.
No, these are, on average, these are like a third of an acre.
What is 1,000? I'm sorry, 4,000 square feet is.
Yeah.
So a tenth of an acre versus the 0.28 acres, or about a quarter of an acre, which is what is mostly on Main Street. And then you get into the Pine Road and Holly Road, and those are almost all half-acre lots. And what would be the size for the Blenheim lots at 6,000 square feet?
So then that would be 7th of an acre.
Okay, so considerably smaller, right? Than the half acres that are right there at Pine and Holly. I mean, the smallest lot on Pine and Holly is, I believe, 0.37 acres, and there's no house. That's actually owned by a next door neighbor's house, so it increases their overall lot size. But we're looking at Pine and Holly, 0.42 acres up to a full acre. And then again, the only spot is Harrison Street where it matches anywhere around that, but the houses directly next door on Bird Street are considerably larger lot sizes overall and all the way down. So that's just kind of a counterpoint to that. There's only a certain amount of spaces where that is actually the case where it matches neighboring communities. With infrastructure, the biggest question that I think a lot of people in the community have is about infrastructure. How will adding Blenheim, for instance, to the Pine and Holly Street infrastructure and the water infrastructure there, how is that going to impact the development? Right now, Ravenna Water and Sewer and the authorities have a plan that's supposed to start next year to replace the water and sewer or the water lines that were originally for a different type of installation completely. They're undersized. How will that delay the project? And then with that in mind, can the town put a stipulation that the project has to be completed by X amount of time? Because if you give them a special use permit and then they never move on it, like how many years have they owned the property? Over 10. If they never move on the actual development and then the town does put into place a PUD, they're still stuck to this plan, right? Based on how you said that the laws are frozen.
I don't know your SUP well enough, but most of them have a statute of limitations if you don't build within 2 years. I don't know.
Yeah, it used to be that they all expired post 2007 recession. Virginia law took away our ability to do that and let existing SUPs continue, thinking that like the housing market would recover and people would build projects as planned. So right now I can't set the expiration. If that changes in Richmond, we'll get our expiration date.
Okay.
So how will that water plan that could be delayed impact adding water and sewer to this location? How will Bird Street's already the owners on Bird Street who may not have sewer but have water, how will they be impacted by the construction of new lines? Will the developer help offset the cost to those individuals on having this go through their yards? What are those sort of infrastructure considerations?
So for water and sewer, my perhaps erroneous assumption was that it currently already runs to the plant.
Yeah, there's a main there now. And so you would be water and sewer and gas.
So probably, and again, I don't know the absolute specifics. My neighborhood was built when it was in Chesterfield County and everybody had septic. The city took it, put water and sewer in. Everybody except one neighbor is now on city water and sewer, but that was at their cost to hook up to the mains. So is that a similar situation where before there was a town sewer line, these houses had their own septic systems and they just have never looked into the TAM system. Is that probably? I mean, that's what my assumption is that they probably have the opportunity at their own cost to look into the TAM. But I can't say for certain because I don't know the specific things. All
What
right.
about the Blenheim one with the aging pipe systems and Pine and Holly, and if that project gets placed out, like how will that impact it? And can a stipulation be placed on, like, can one of the conditions be a certain finish time on the new development?
Well, I think Matt said that he cannot put a finish time on them under state law. Is that correct? Did I hear that correctly? So that part just legally can't be done. I don't know, again, the specifics of the water line, I sure would seem poor planning if you would put a brand new water and sewer line in and not be able to accommodate 24 more houses, but I don't know for sure, you know.
You're asking about the condition of the old lines in Pine and Holly now?
Yeah, because you were talking, I think I heard somebody say about the conversation earlier that the new lines have been placed in downtown, but not on Pine and Holly, which is not supposed to start even until next year.
So if the water and sewer authority's got, on schedule to replace those 50-year-old lines, I would expect them to kind of stick to that schedule regardless of any new construction. They know how to budget and maintain their lines.
So that would inherently delay that project and the road project.
I don't know. I mean, I guess why would it delay that project?
Well, that's what I'm asking. Like, would it delay by having a project where you're trying to update the water and sewer lines up to that location? Will that impact or delay any potential development, or is it that the development would build the water and sewer lines for them and then just have the expectation that a new hookup should come into place?
Okay, so if I have the excavating company and I'm doing the construction on the I'll do my job and dig my trench and lay my pipe and then connect it on to the ACSA system, and then it becomes public utility. So it won't be ACSA employees who are digging the trench on these houses and laying pipe. They'll contract separately on any repairs they needed to do in Pine and Holly, and it could be that those jobs are happening at the same time. It's totally separate.
Sorry, I just didn't understand parts of the question. All right, so we're wrapping up. Yes, please.
This is funny. I came in a little late. I'm sorry, but I appreciate it so much what you said. This whole thing was felt a little bit like a foregone conclusion that would be railroaded a little bit. My name's Kim Schmidt. I lived in Scottsville area, 1995. With 2 small children. We raised them in a unique town. Kentucky was like a little bit of Americana. It doesn't exist anymore. And that's why people left. And people do because of course we're I'm a retired nurse. There's lots of nurses. We live in Scottsville. I ran a beauty bar, did lots of young women in my barn. 5 moved to Scottsville. So it is a community. People are moving here. It's a place that's so special. And I'm so afraid. You keep saying 40 houses. Why don't we talk about 16? Why don't we keep minimum so we don't impact this special one?
Yeah,
they turn it into another crusade. We don't want that. They ruined crusade. My friends live in crusade. They want out of it. They want to trust it. And I don't want that to happen. My I have 2 boys in their 30s. They came up to Washington, D.C. He's coming back to Scottsville, and everyone's in Scottsville. This is where they want to live. And they don't. It's special. Just she said, we can do this.
Well, you can propose 16. The proposal from the developer, and again, you may have missed it. I don't work for the developer. I've never spoken to the developer. I'm not advocating for the developer's position. The 48 is what the developer has proposed. The town can approve conditions on that or alterations to it. The developer does not have to accept this. Now, they would not be able to build 48, but just because the town says build 18, the developer does not have to say, great, I'll build 18.
We have some control.
Well, this is the control right now.
Yeah. So we can vote
Yeah.
But 16 houses double and maybe triples the cost of the house. Like then you're talking pro se costs.
We can vote it down.
Here.
We can say, yes, we can say, no, we don't want this. Yes, we do want this. Or if you want more houses, then you have the right to build. We'll let you we'll give you a few more houses. But in order to build those extra houses, you have to follow these conditions. Oh yeah, we're trying. That's what we're trying to find out. What do you want us to tell to make it all? If we give them more houses,
and if the developer has by right, they can build up to 13 houses on this property, and I think it's 1.25 acre lots, minimum size lots, and you know, but other than that. It doesn't have much say in what those houses look like, etc.
So if they want to build 14, they can by right, they can build 13. If they want to build 14, we say, yeah, you can build 14, but you got to do it this way. If you don't want to do it this way, you can build 13, but you can't build any. So we have control, some control once we start to allow them to build more than they have also. But up to that point, unless if they don't, yeah, so we can go back and we say, okay, you're asking for 48, but we can only give you 15, and they all have to be Adobe house. If you don't want to build 15 Adobe houses, you can build 13, whatever you want.
So you could say that we ask that you build 15 houses, but stick to a smaller house plan with more open land in order to keep costs down. You're not guaranteed just because you're putting 15 houses to get the expansion.
Correct. Yeah. So we can, if they want more houses, we can say how many more houses and what we want them to be. The developer then can decide, I'm going to build those and sell them, or I'm not going to build them and we'll go back to 13, go wherever I want.
Do the 13 have to be houses, or is it just 13 structures?
Residential units.
Dwelling units is how it's written.
Units?
Yeah.
Yeah.
On the by right.
By right allows duplex and quadplex. So if I wanted to build something, I could go to this property owner and cut off 1.5 acres for myself. And if I could get him to sell me just 1.5 acres, then I could build a quadruplex for myself and rent out the.
So then could we end up with 13 quadplexes?
Potentially. And it would
and we have no say over it.
Those would have to go out very carefully one at a time. And you would have to convince me that each one was separate and that you weren't like sneaking in some kind of cluster. But if 13 different people each bought a lot and then tried to do their by right development on it, you could long term get something like that. That would be unusual. But it would be within the law.
And again, I just want to make it clear, and I'll get to you here, is that what the town can do is the town can put requirements if you want to develop must meet this. They cannot require the owner to build it. So just because if the town said we approve this at 16, it doesn't mean that the developer has to build at 16. They could say, I don't make any money this way, so I'm not going to. They could say, yeah, that's good enough. I don't care. I'll sell the land, and then somebody else can build what they want. So, you know, if just because the town says 16 or 18 or 36 does not mean that's acceptable.
Last question with regards to that. How long has this landowner owned this property with by right options?
The housing up there, it's only been about a year. So it was up until about a year ago, it was zoned light industrial. We carved off.
Say Blenheim.
Blenheim.
Same owner owns about 80% of the open.
Yes, they've owned that for quite some time, and I believe it's owned for one house every 2 acres. And there's been, since I've lived here for the last 10 years. So there's no, they have decided they're not going to be able to make enough money to build one house on 2 acres, or he thinks he can make money by holding out and carving it up like that.
And just again, I'm not saying that you guys should take this. I'm just saying, from the developer's perspective, it costs a lot of money to put a road and stormwater runoff treatment for it, and grading it and all of that. And at some point, it's just not enough units to make it worthwhile. That's not our problem.
And that's true. We as a town may decide that we don't want to change the zoning out there. We don't want to give them a special permit, and then they say, what's out there for? I don't know. Or it could, or they could decide to build, 12 McMansions out there.
So I think we've talked through that. So what I'd like now is to get just the final bits of your comments, any type of special conditions that you would like to offer to the town council to consider. And we'll go ahead and take your one last comment and we'll wrap it up.
Just for clarity's sake, it's actually 1.5 acres.
I'm sorry.
Match, we went through that exercise, and there's all sorts of setbacks, and the county has to get involved. So that's theoretical that could happen, but it's not necessarily that it could or would be able to fund it or approve. But the main reason I was having my hand up the whole time is that the 250 to 350 is an exercise in square footage and multiplication. And if they don't have countertops that are certain ways, and if they don't do this, and if they don't do that. Just for clarification for the people in this room, the person is proposing to carve up this property, not building a single function, a single plant. We have no idea what they'll look like. We have no idea what they're going to cost. $250,000 home in Scottsville, I can sell them all day long. I have a hard time believing that's going to be there. I really do. Just like putting in mobile homes, it's a possibility. It's there. So that number can't get stuck in our heads if that's affordable or anything. That's just a number and an exercise with multiplication with square footage and possibilities. Okay? So you really kind of have to keep that down. That's not what's being proposed.
You're absolutely correct. And so again, when you go to the conditions, one of our first questions was, yes, there are some design elements that you can put as a special condition. All right, yes,
I'd like to going back to the question about sudden moving overall and capacity. If development in a third of the whole property sucks up all of the capacity for the road capacity under the current zoning ordinance, then what happens to the rest of is the rest of the property still contingent upon that, still tied to that?
Are you talking about the
houses have sucked up the entire road capacity for 63 acres?
Are you talking about the ingress egress requirement? The two, so that's just for the project site, a road in and 2 roads in and out, period. That's just for the site.
And what happens with the rest of the site?
then that would have to be addressed in the future.
So
Special use permit.
yeah, I think we're conflating that we're using the word site in multiple different ways. So there's a project area that is just that parcel.
I get you.
So that requirement, if I'm understanding Matt correctly, that requirement would just be the beige parcel, just the project area. So if I'm understanding correctly, then that.
So, right, so this is Bird Street coming in here. And my understanding is that the requirement is not that there is another road here or here going back beyond it. It's just from Bird Street. You could require another road that goes that way so that emergency vehicles have two opportunities to come into.
That's not Bird Street.
I'm
Bird
sorry.
Street ends at where that proposed driveway is. From there on, it's no longer state maintained, it's a private driveway. Okay. Also, I think to address Susan's point is that this is again piecemealing to get around that ordinance of 50 or more, and you have to have all these safeties. So yes, they should do it again here, do it again here, and still max out over and over again. It's just a workaround. And this is something that's been brought up over and over again, just like it's Lenham, it's a workaround.
I see what you're saying.
Instead of dealing with it all. So, point is, as long as they keep doing 150, they can do it.
Right. Well, they can get away with it, except each time they need to apply for a special use permit. So if you wanted to require that as a condition of this special use permit, you could, as well as in the future for each one.
So ultimately, if we go with 48 and 8 acres, so if they get 36 on that one, on the village residential, then you could just continue to file. And then you've got the tire factory, which is zoned residential, which the small area plan calls for having a mix of commercial and residential and maybe senior housing there. Or it's still industrial, so it could be a welding factory or an airplane factory, and there would be a lot more traffic.
I mean, you're right. At some point, the emergency egress is going to need to be addressed, especially the pinch point someone mentioned where there's a large oak tree in front of the library. Was that you? So at some point, it probably will have to be addressed. It doesn't sound like legally it can be addressed in this SUP.
But it would be possible just to deny the SUP, come back and enact a PUD ordinance and put it in the comprehensive plan, which is going to be, updated this year anyway, and put some very strong language that Bird Street and Lenham should be planned for a PUD.
Yeah. One of the most interesting recent comments I've heard was when discussing about Crozet and how this could lead to a potential Crozet, is that Crozet is now trying to revert or get town status. And the comment was, it's a bit like they're attempting to shut the barn door after the horse is already bolted. This is the opportunity for Scottsville to shut the barn door before the horse is bolted. And to be able to do that. I just found that a very interesting comment, and that is kind of where we're at. We're right now, many of the community members feel like they're still in the house in the kitchen, not even near the barn. But by doing a community meeting, which we appreciate the town council doing this as we have requested this community meeting, and it's very helpful to make sure everybody is as educated about this as possible. But now we feel closer to the barn. And now it's just a matter of shutting the door before the horse bolts, or watching the horse get away from us and having nothing to do to be able to call it back.
Well, I want to thank you all for coming out. Again, I think we've had good, productive conversation. I hope you all have learned a little bit along the way, and we've certainly taken lots of notes.
Yes.
So those will all be reflected. Please leave as much detail as you care to on your sheets there, and have a great rest of the weekend. And hopefully it's fun snow and not bad snow.
Oh my gosh, I totally know her. She came to my house one time.
Oh, really? Let's see.